Hi everyone, this is Wes Coleman from COPS, Correctional Officers Paranormal Society, here to wish Kat Ward and the Paranormal Heart Podcast a very happy 5th anniversary. I would like to thank Kat for having me on her 5th year anniversary episode, so please stay tuned and enjoy.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Welcome back, folks, to Paranormal Heart Podcast 5th anniversary episode. I'm so happy you're here. I can't believe 5 years has gone by already. And I want to take the time to thank all the wonderful guests who have been on the show over the years. I've had some pretty amazing people sharing their stories with us. And to you, yes, you, my listeners, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't still be doing this. So thank you from the bottom of my paranormal heart, see what I did there? For spending your precious time and tuning in every show. Thank you. My special guest this episode is founder and paranormal investigator of Correctional Officers Paranormal Society, or COPS, Wes Coleman. I had the great pleasure in meeting Wes a couple years ago while the team and I were investigating at Picton Heights in Picton, Ontario. He's an amazing guy who's been investigating the paranormal for many years. Wes discusses with us how he got into the paranormal and about some of the methods him and his team use to investigate. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or have questions, comments, or just want to say hello, drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy the show, please like, share, subscribe, and please leave a comment. It's one of the many ways to show your support. New episodes are released on the second and last Sunday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me on YouTube, Podbean, KPNL Digital Network on Thursday nights, and any place you find fine podcast. Now, on with the show. Hello, Wes. Welcome to Paranormal Heart.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy you're here. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know who you are, and I'm sure there's not too many people who don't know who you are, because you're pretty well known in the paranormal community, why don't you give us a little history on it, about yourself?
Well, I've been in the field, comparatively speaking, not very long, probably about 14 or 15 years.
Not long.
Yeah, well, I'm an old man, so it's not very long on the scale of my evolution anyway. But I'm a correctional officer. I have been for close to 30 years, and I started in the paranormal as an interest as a very young child. I read a book called Some Canadian Ghosts. And it's by a lovely woman named Sheila Hervey, and she wrote a book about like different stories from different parts of the country. And the most interesting story I remember reading was about a young girl who saw the spirit of her grandmother when she woke up in the middle of the night one night when I think she was around 8 years old. And she recounts the story about how her deceased grandmother, was there at the foot of her bed, talking to her and making her feel comfortable. And it really stuck with me. And that was I was in grade 3 or grade 4, and I still have the book to this day. And I've always wanted to expand more on it. And once I got older, and I didn't really have my first paranormal experience until I was a teenager, and it was as a young Canadian boy does, he plays road hockey with his friends, and I saw a face in a window at my friend's house, and I knew there was nobody home, and I said to my buddy Will, I said, there's somebody in the window there. And I said, and he said, really, there shouldn't be anybody home. And of course, like a true paranormal story goes, he looks back and the face is gone. But it did look like this old man, and I always tell people it always reminded me of the guy off the Canadian Tire Money. So those who are Canadian know that the face on the Canadian Tire Money. I think he's called Scotty, but he's an old guy with the Scottish hat and the beard and mustache. And so that was my first paranormal experience, and it wasn't just a matter of fact. I mean, by my story, it probably doesn't sound like a huge deal, but to me as a kid, it was very shocking.
So,
And yeah, so I got as the years progressed, I kind of never really thought about it anymore until I had another experience the first year I was married, and I was down at a place called the Elora Mill, which is just north of Guelph, Ontario, and had an experience in one of the rooms there overlooking the mill of voices like kids, and this was around 1 o'clock in the morning, hearing kids running out in the hall, and I would hear like taps turning on and off, and I was with my wife at the time, and she was like, "What's going on out in the hall?" And we couldn't sleep, and finally I'd had enough, and I phoned down to the front of it's like a bed and breakfast. It was not really a hotel, but there's only a handful of rooms, and I said, "Yeah, there's these kids running around in the hall, and I was wondering if you could maybe come up and talk to them, or have them quiet down." And there was like a dead silence, excuse the pun, but a dead silence on the other end of the line. And shortly after, I heard them come up, because it's a very small hotel. I could hear them coming up the stairs, and then it just went quiet. So I phoned down shortly after, and I said, thank you for quieting them, making them quiet. And they said, well, first of all, this is an adults only like place, and there was absolutely no kids or anything in the hall. And I said, well, I know what I heard, and I said, like, this place wouldn't be haunted by any chance, would it? And then the person said, well, I can't really talk about that because we don't really want like the negative publicity. And I said, okay. I said, no problem. I said, I'll talk to the manager about it in the morning. And in the morning, I talked to the manager, and the same kind of thing. The manager, we really don't want to make this a public thing. So, we're not going to mention anything, or didn't want me to mention anything. So I didn't. And I kind of kept that to myself, but it kind of drew the interest back in me from when I was a kid. And I was really like, okay, I really want to get to the bottom of this. Like, I really want to find out more, like, what is this all about? And so it was about 5 years after that, I decided to, when I was working in corrections, I was asking a bunch of my fellow team members, because at that time I was on the emergency response team at work, which is like a riot team. And I asked them, I said, like, is there anybody that's interested in the paranormal who wants to get a group together? And I kind of thought at the time, boy, I'm going to really get it for this if nobody steps forward, because it's kind of at the time I kind of thought it's like a nerdy thing to ask a group, and they would probably get quite a kick out of it. But there were three members that stepped forward who were very interested, Chris, Terry, and Darren. And we got together, decided what we were going to do. but first of all, we wanted to get training. You just can't come into the field and just go by the seat of your pants. You want to get somebody that kind of helps you out. And that was a gentleman by the name of Dave Gibb from CHAPS, the Canadian Haunting and Paranormal
He's a great
Society.
guy.
Yeah, and he took us under his wing and showed us the do's and don'ts, and was very He's very practical in the way he thinks, and an amazing guy. And he kind of got us all started. And from there, we started investigating all these different places across the States, and here in Canada, helping people out with the problems. Some people that have issues with the paranormal in their homes, and then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to also work on my own, and so I hooked up with a gentleman by the name of Richard Estep, who is a prolific paranormal author who lives in Denver, Colorado. And I started working on his books over the course of a few years. And I've been in a few of his books centered in England and also the United States. And started, working with him a little bit as well. And then I started to do different conventions, go to different conventions and meet other people. And it's a learning experience. It's, not something, I hate to use the word professional or expert. I don't believe in that, because it's, we're always learning in the field, because we still, after all these years, I have no idea what the paranormal is. I started out thinking that I could logically explain it through science, but boy, was I open for a change, because I soon started in some of the investigations that we did. I soon started experiencing feelings and thoughts, and I kind of disregarded them at the start, thinking, this is crazy for me to think this way. Names would come into my head, and feelings of hate or love or whatever the situation may be, and I would ignore them. But then found out later that these things were actually true to the area that I was in. But I would deny these feelings just because I didn't think they were practical. But after a certain period of time of all these things happening, and my feelings and my judgments and my thoughts and the names that I was getting started coming through as being true, I thought, well, maybe I need to reevaluate the way I do things. And so I started using more of a spiritual method rather than a practical method. And the only problem with that is that you open yourself up to scrutiny, because a lot of people think, you're just saying these things, or you're just, you're reading stuff, and, but a lot of this stuff that I would know about a place would not be even written down. And just some very interesting things that would happen. And I would put it out there and give the story to the people. And if the people believed in it, then great. If they didn't believe in it, that was fine too. I never got offended by what people thought, because I'm in the paranormal for myself and trying to get answers for myself. So it didn't, I don't mind sharing stories, and I don't mind, letting people, think what they want about it. But, you get to a point where what you experience, and that's all that really matters in the end.
Now, growing up, did you have abilities or experiences in the paranormal, or is that something that developed later on as you got more into the paranormal?
Well, I think that I did, but I also think that I dismissed them as well. I mean, I grew up in a very Christian family. My dad was a chaplain in the military, and we spoke about this before. And it it was something I was always very sensitive to places and people. I would always meet people when I was younger, and just by meeting them, really get a feeling of the type of person they were, if they were a good person or a bad person. And it was always a gift that I still have, even working as a prison officer. I obviously deal with a lot of bad people, but
Mm-hmm.
I also know if somebody's sincere or they're not sincere. And I think that's what's helped me become successful as a prison officer, is that ability. And whether you call it paranormal or not, maybe it's just intuition, but those kind of things, those feelings, those, I don't know what you'd call it, but, just the impressions people and places gave me always really, paranormal or not, they were always strong with me ever since I was very young.
Like a sixth sense.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm special in any way. I honestly believe that everybody has that ability. They just have to open themselves up to it. And I think everybody is able to, because I'll tell you something, when I first started, with my group, COPS, which is Correctional Officers Paranormal Society, I just purely believed in the physical evidence. And it wasn't until later that, as I said before, that there's much more to it than that.
Yeah, it's not just the equipment, but using yourself as well as to sense what's going on.
Exactly. And we used a lot of equipment at the start, and I still use a bit of equipment, but I found I was focusing more on the equipment and not on what was going on around me. And
Ah,
so I'm missing out on things. And so I've kind of depleted my equipment to some of the most important pieces of equipment, and I dabble in some pieces of equipment, and but my main pieces of equipment are my recorder, and like that to me is getting voices, EVPs.
mhm.
But for me, it's it goes far beyond that. I know there's a lot of equipment out there that's very people will refute it, and but used in the right way, there's certain evidence that you will get from it, but you just have to open your mind up to it, and I don't believe any one piece of equipment is definitive as far as getting evidence. But there are pieces of equipment that help a lot more than others, and I think there's a lot of equipment that's basically just equipment. I don't think it helps in any way, but everybody has their own opinions, right?
Yeah. I feel too that certain individuals are more in tune to certain pieces of equipment. I could use, say, a K2 meter, and I don't get very many results, but yet someone else could use it and they have amazing results.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting how that happens.
Yep.
And like one of the methods that I like using it's called the Estes method.
Yep.
And that's where I get a lot of my information when I'm at a place, when I do the Estes method. And for people who don't know really what that is, it's basically you have a recorder, and you plug it in to your sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. You're plugging it into a ghost box or a spirit box, and you're listening to it through a set of earphones, so you can't hear what's going on around you, because there's a lot of white noise. If anybody's ever listened to a spirit box, it's just a noise. Basically scans through all the channels of FM or AM frequencies, and the theory is that voices will come through the scan through your earphones. So the Estes method, you can't hear anything that's going around you, and you're blindfolded. and there is a person that asks questions to you, and you can't hear the questions, but you spit out whatever you hear from the ghost box or the spirit box, and you try to find out if the questions correlate with the answers from the person that's what we say under the hood, or who's listening to the spirit box. And there's been just a ton of different results I've had over the years with that. I mean, at the start, I was getting information from the spirit box, but then I started finding out that while I'm under, I'm also getting words into my head as well. It's almost like the spirit box is giving me the ability to get other words from the other side as well. And at the start, I would ignore them. Because I was thinking, what's this got to do with anything? You know, I'm supposed to be saying words directly from the spirit box.
Mm-hmm.
But then those words started to actually make sense to some of the questions that were being asked to me. I mean, one of the craziest situations I had with that is I was at a house that's a well-noted haunted location in the United States, and I won't say it because I won't say the name of it right now, because the client or the owner of the house told me not to mention her name.
Fair enough. Yep.
Very private situation that happened with me with the ghost box. And basically what happened is I was they were asking me questions, and the client was in the house, in the room with me, and I kept on getting this feeling that I was being raped. And
Wow.
it was extremely emotional, extremely powerful. I got a person's name, so I started saying this stuff. Of course, I'm blindfolded and I can't hear anything. And the client's in the room, and apparently she's getting very upset. And then I saw right at the end, before I took the earphones and everything off because I was so upset, I saw a flash of her face. And so I took the earphones off and I looked over at her, and the tears were running down her face. And I was very emotional, and I just went over and I hugged her. And, I said to her, I said, like, I think I know what happened. And she said, yeah, I know you know what happened. And like, I basically gave her a hug. And so she had been raped in this one room. And so those were the feelings I was getting, and I was never really the same that night after that. Like, it was such a powerful feeling. I've never felt that as a man before.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like I was being raped and violated, and it was a very, very strong. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how strong those feelings were. So that was probably the most significant Estes method session I ever had.
Wow, I've never heard of anybody having that much of an intense experience using that method.
Yeah, it was. Well, I consider myself empathic,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't. I honestly believe everybody has that ability. I don't think I'm special or anything like that. You just have to tune yourself into it, and it was a horrible feeling, and I'll never forget it to this day. Like, when I'm going over it in my head right now, like, it still makes me upset, and I start shaking because it was that intense of an experience.
Can I ask how long ago that happened?
That would have been, well, it was actually the last investigation I did prior to COVID.
Mm.
So it was around, I think it was February 2020.
Mm-hmm. So still relatively new, but far enough away.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'll never forget.
Yeah.
It was very intense, and the whole room was intense after that. We were all,
I can imagine.
it was an incredible experience, but a very sad experience as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Are you still in contact with her?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of such an intense encounter with that method. It seems so the past few years, more and more investigators are using that method.
Yeah, it's something that I mean, it's kind of a proven method in a lot of ways. Excuse me, because the person it's a double-blind experiment.
Mm-hmm.
The person can't hear, they can't see, and somebody is asking questions, and if those questions can be anything. I mean, the only way it can be fake is if somebody set it up beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
the questions and the answers. But if you have integrity in the field, and people know the kind of person you are, then they'll believe it. But I always tell people, like, as I said before, like I just tell people my stories, and if they want to believe it, that's fine. And if they don't have to either. It's my experience. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, as a correctional officer, have you had paranormal experiences while on the job?
Not definitive ones. I've seen shadows. The biggest thing is, as you get older, when you're learning everything about the paranormal, one of the hardest things to do is try not to dismiss things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can be in a place and you might see a shadow and go, okay, that must be somebody's shadow. Like, I mean, you get to a point where you constantly dismiss things because you think if you brought them out in the open, people would think you're crazy. So, so sometimes you just automatically dismiss things. And when you're first starting as a paranormal investigator, you really have to train your mind not to dismiss
Mm-hmm.
things that you hear or see. Get to the bottom of it. Like, try to debunk things. Debunking is very important. So you try to figure out answers for things like banging noises, or seeing things in the dark, or getting EVPs and finding out if anybody else has been talking. Generally, through the use of a video camera, you can see if somebody was talking at the time, or just trying to debunk all the time. But yeah, the biggest thing is trying to open your mind up to your surroundings, and not be so quick to dismiss things.
I find that can be a little difficult to do because most people growing up were always told to um, dismiss things as a child. If you see things, oh, you dreamt it, or it was something else. There's always been excuses for what it could actually be when it was actually something else. So when you're told that these things don't actually exist, when you actually start having these encounters as an adult, even sometimes it's hard to get your mind into that mindset to be able to open up your mind and your like, don't be so closed-minded, and sometimes it can be a little difficult for people.
Well, absolutely. And that's the hardest thing to prove to non-believers, is to tell them to keep your mind open, because they're so close-minded about
Hmm.
things. Like, oh, this just doesn't exist, or this doesn't happen, or they're always quick to judge um, sounds,
Hmm.
or anything like that. But if you just tell them to, just be more open to everything that's around you, become more in tune with the frequencies and the wavelengths of the place that you're in and the environment, and just leave your mind open and just see what happens. And yeah, it's it's really hard to. And trust me, I mean, I've been as I said, a correctional officer for almost 30 years. So you know, knowing and seeing the facts are so imperative in my field. That for me to talk the way I do about the empathic abilities and opening yourself up in your mind up to stuff, it's a total dichotomy to to what I stand for as a correctional officer. So like it's learning a whole different spiritual side to you that you're not used to doing.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any inmates confide in you about experience they've had in the past, or do they even know what you do?
I try to keep that information
Yeah.
as private. I mean, it's difficult because we've been on the local news, and they all have TVs, and a lot of them are very familiar with the guys that do it, and we do tend to be a little more careful with telling people where we're going to be and that sort of
Oh,
thing.
for sure, yeah.
But I do encourage if somebody were to come up to me and say, I work at a fairly modern prison, and I won't say what it is, but it's a very modern place, and so there's, not to say that there wouldn't be ghosts. There's spirits and ghosts, at very modern places too, but there just doesn't seem to be that kind of activity at our place for whatever reason. But that's not to say that I try to shut off. The biggest challenge for me as a correctional officer and having that empathic ability is to shut off my emotions when I come into work.
Mm-hmm.
And not let the surroundings affect me in any way. It's always a super hard challenge for me. But I do my best, but I do go into certain places, and I'll think and after 30 years you get a feeling, like I'll walk in one day and I'll think something's going to happen today. There's and I'll get that feeling, and sure enough, something does happen. You just kind of feel the overall emotion of the place and how people are reacting to the things that you say. And I certainly get a feeling when I come in, and on that kind of a day.
Do you have any specific rituals, I guess, for lack of a better term, that you do when you go into work and you want to kind of tune a lot of that out?
It's more of a frame of mind. Like I'll just come in, and sometimes sometimes it's not easy. And sometimes it's very beneficial too, because when I walk into a situation, I want to be alerted in some way that something's going south in here, so that does help me, and it benefits me with my job. But there are times when one of my jobs is basically a counselor for some of the inmates, because I help them. I'm in charge of their caseload, and I make sure that they're doing their programs and that they're staying out of trouble. But one of the things I do is I have to know their file and what they've done, and so reading those things, it can be very difficult, because you do get emotional, and especially in some violence situations regarding children and women and that sort of thing, and it can be very difficult. And I catch myself before I start sliding, basically, because I'll read these files, and I'm kind of one of these type of people where I start reading things, and there are a lot of people like this, but it starts playing as a movie in their head, and it's very difficult sometimes to shut that off before you get too far into a file, and you just want to read the file and not take it in, which is it's challenging, but for my own sanity, it's just something that I have to do.
I definitely admire you and all those who are in the field, because I think it takes a special kind of person to do this.
Well, I appreciate that. It's it is a challenging job, but everybody has a job that's challenging to some degree. It's just different, and it does have its moments, but it's what I signed up for. So, and at the end of the day, we go home to our families, but I like, I always, tell the offenders or inmates, like if, you genuinely want to change and that's something that you really want to do, then, my door is always open. You can always come and talk to me. It doesn't have to be, related to your crime or anything. Maybe you just, something's going on and you just need to get your head clear. You can come in and talk,
Hmm.
and I've always had that policy, because you have to have some degree of job satisfaction, you want to
Yeah.
be able to say that. And, I get Christmas cards at work from inmates that were on my caseload, 10, 15
Oh,
years ago.
wow. That's
Um,
amazing.
that have thanked me for what I've done for them, and that to me is my reward. That
Hmm.
that is makes me keep going, basically.
Years ago in New Brunswick, I worked in this restaurant, and there was this oh, I can't remember what it was called, but there was the restaurant was working with the halfway house. So when the gentleman came out of prison and they'd stay in the halfway house, they'd give them a job for 6 months to try and help them get back into society. And if they did well, then after 6 months they would hire them. So there was this one gentleman that I was working with, big guy. This little tiny nun walks in one evening, and he comes running out, and I can't remember what her name was, but he went over and gave her a big hug. Apparently she worked at the penitentiary that he was at, and she was the type of lady that he says she could walk into a room full of murderers, but nobody would dare lay a hand on her because everybody loved her so much, because she just protected this or projected this energy that she wanted to help people, and everybody in that penitentiary would protect her with their lives. And he just comes running out, gives her a big hug. She remembered him, wished him well. They spoke for a little bit, and yeah, just to me that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's contagious, really. Some of them, they've made like mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just looking for a way to you know, to try to find a better life. And there are some that aren't like that at all.
Yeah.
There's some who continue to want to be. And I've got a fairly good handle on that. I mean, when you worked almost 30 years in the prison, you have a pretty good handle of the people that want to change and the people that don't want to change. But you do your best. All you can do is give them the tools to change, and if they take those tools and
Mm-hmm.
change, it's great. And if not, they'll be back in.
Yeah.
It's a challenging situation, but it all stems from that person wanting to change. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing.
Now, when it comes to your investigations, how do you enter? Do you? I'm trying to think of how I could word this. A lot of teams start off with saying prayers, or they have crystals, or they have something to protect them. Some people don't use anything at all. How do you go into an investigation?
Well, I always say a prayer beforehand. As I said before, I'm the son of
Mm-hmm.
a chaplain, and I'm very strong with my faith. I have a firm belief in God, and so I always say a prayer of protection before I go in, and also at the end as well. And I also say, like if there are any spirits here that intend to follow me home or anything like that, I make it a point at saying, you're to remain here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anything coming home with me. And I know people that these spirits or sometimes entities will latch on and will come home with some people, but I've never had that. So it's and not to say that my I like to think my prayer works, but I know there are people that do protection rituals that still get attachments. So you just do what you can to really come down to your faith and what you believe in to help you through the investigation.
What's your favorite place to investigate? Excuse me, investigate. Would it be private residences or like old jails or what do you like to investigate yourself?
Well, they're also very different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get the most gratification out of helping people. I mean, we go to private residences and help people deal with their situations. But that being said, you know, it's different when I go to like an old jail or an old asylum or, you know, a house that's a well-known, you know, haunted house that's now used as a place for investigation. But I think the most rewarding is you know, helping people in the
Mm-hmm.
community. I mean, there's you know, everybody thinks that there's, you know, a lot of this stuff going on, but you know, there's a it's very rare that you find some place that's, you know, has something that's very negative, negative energy in it. A lot of it is psychological,
Mm-hmm.
and we've dealt with people that are have schizophrenia. We have dealt with people that have, you know, emotional and psychological issues, which I believe can create, you know, the potential for paranormal activity. And it's incredible, you know, and my mindset has really changed over the years with regards to that as well, because I really think that people have enough energy inside their minds that they can create things that aren't actually there, but to them it's very real. So you have to really be careful on your approach with something like that, and try to find out, you know, everything that's going on. You know, we before we investigate, we always have a questionnaire for
Mm-hmm.
people to fill out, and you know, to tell us a little bit about themselves, and you know, if they're on medication or you know, basically their life situation, and it gives us a better idea of what we're walking into when we go to investigate.
Have you ever investigated a place where your client is convinced that there's a haunting and you find it's either high EMF from even their circuit breaker or infrasound or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, we did probably about 3 years ago. We investigated a house up a place called Norwood, which is just off of Highway 7, and a woman had said that they had an in-law suite in the basement, and the mother of the client lived down in the basement, and she kept on seeing the apparition of a man in the corner of a room. And she, you know, obviously made her feel very uncomfortable. And so they called us and said, you know, can you come and investigate and figure out what's going on? And that's exactly what happened. The whole the electrical panel for the house was
Mm-hmm.
behind a wall in that corner, like you know, with it had the door on it that you
Mm-hmm.
open up. There was the electrical panel, and it was right in that section. And sure enough, of course, you know, when you take any piece of equipment and you go around an electrical panel, it'll light up like
Yeah.
crazy, like K2 or you know, any kind of those kind of devices. So we immediately said, you know, there was another room in the basement, and we suggested that she sleep in a different room for a while and see how that went. And she did, and she never had a problem again. And so we assumed that it was, you know, the high EMF electromagnetic field
Mm-hmm.
readings that were causing, and they can cause hallucinations.
Yep.
And that's what she was encountering.
It just amazes me how high EMF levels or even infrasound, natural or man-made, can affect the human body.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. It really is. It's there's so much more to, you know, when you think of the paranormal, you know, when you mention the paranormal to somebody, um, they think it's just one kind of thing, but there's so many offshoots to the paranormal. There's different things that can create different things, and you know, all we can really, you know, kind of come to the bottom to is that, something is going on. What paranormal activity is, well, we really don't know. I mean, yes, it can be spirits, it can be entities, but as I said before, it can also be a human psychology too. It can be somebody manifesting something that's in their head. The power of the mind is huge, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people take it for granted and underestimate what the mind can do, and it can create a lot of situations. But yeah, there are obvious situations like high EMF fields that can cause those hallucinations as well.
My father has always been into, he's a ham radio operator, and when he used to work for the CN, his job, he was a radio tech, and he would always my apologies, getting tongue-tied here. He sent me a piece of equipment that I cherish when I go on investigations. It's actually a wire finder. So if you don't know what's behind a wall or what's under a floor, when a client tells you, yes, I'm having lots of activity here, and there's no panel or like no circuit breaker or anything around, but you can't really ask your client, can I put a hole in your floor to see what's down there? This piece of equipment tells me if there's live wires under there, and then that's usually tells me, oh, okay, that's probably why you're getting paranormal experiences in this location.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that, but we use the FLIR too,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is similar in a way. It detects the heat. So
Yep.
I mean, if you flash the FLIR on a wall and you see a tremendous amount of heat in a certain area, that can give you an indication that there's something behind that wall that can cause something as well.
Yep. Now, when you use your FLIR, have you ever seen any apparitions on it that, no one's standing there, but when you look at your FLIR, it looks like there is?
Well, one of the places that we manage a place, it's a paintball facility now. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Picton Heights.
Yep.
You were there, right?
Yep, that's where we met.
Right. So that, as you know, was an old military base / asylum hospital. When down at one of the hallways there, I was flashing the FLIR, and I was with a group. I can't remember who was with me at the time, but it was definitely with a group from the public. We were doing a public investigation, and we were looking through the FLIR, and down at the end of the hall, we saw this like little red ball of energy. And as we're looking at it, it's starting to come towards us. Like it was right at the end of the hall, which would have been, I'm going to say, about 200 or 300 feet down the hallway. And it's starting to come towards us and getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it's coming towards us down the hall. And then it seemed to accelerate. And people are like looking at it, and it's coming towards us faster and faster. And we're like, what's going to happen here? And we're at the same time looking down the hall with our naked eye as well, which is black because we don't have any flashlights on.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing just flies right at us and just like dissipates. And all we can feel is just like a small little wind coming by us.
That's
so whether that's a
interesting.
draft, I mean, you can say it's a draft. It was in October. So to get something like a heat source draft in the middle of October would be kind of unusual because
Mm-hmm.
I think temperatures were relatively seasonal that night, probably 12 or 13 degrees, but feel this gentle kind of heat wind go through us was an interesting experience that initially we saw on the FLIR. So that was kind of cool.
Was that in the first building?
It depends what everybody says.
I guess, yeah.
The first building or the second building, but the one that's on the north side or the one to the right when you're facing the buildings.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's the building I was thinking of.
Okay.
Was it on any particular floor? I don't remember if you mentioned that.
Yeah, it was on the top floor.
Yeah.
You probably remember down where the sterilization
Mm-hmm.
equipment was,
Yep.
and there's like a bathtub in there too.
Yep.
that we've picked up different readings in that area. Seems to be a very strong draw in that area for whatever reason. So I don't know if this, whatever this, this organized cloud of energy was, maybe it just, I don't know if it wanted us there or not, but it certainly, a couple of the people decided to go home shortly after that.
I can imagine. Wow. Do you remember if there was any humming or if there's any temperature shifts with it, or was it just a little blast of air?
It was a blast of air. I didn't have, I use another piece of equipment. Just trying to think of the name of it now. Oh, there's so many different names to equipment. But it registers temperature and also is a like a geophone and records vibration and that sort of thing as well. However, I didn't have that with me at the time, and we were so caught up in the moment, we didn't really think about anything else that was going on other than this thing rapidly approaching us. So no, I didn't have anything to measure it at that point, and it was a public investigation too, which is different than a formal investigation because we're just trying to give the public an idea of what we do, and when you have, when we're on investigation, there's 3 or 4 of us as opposed to 10 or 15. It's a little bit different, right? Because there's certain equipment you can't use because too many people just interfere with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I find the larger group, when you're doing an investigation, you might not necessarily have any paranormal encounters at all. I find it's better if it's smaller groups. At least that's in my experience.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely the smaller the better, but it's very difficult. I like to try to educate the public because the TV shows and that, I mean, they're entertainment, and there are some that are more credible than others, but I just like to give people an idea of what, like, a proper investigation is like, from the way we do things. I'm not saying that there's any one particular investigation group that's better than others, but there are some that are a little bit iffy, and so we just give people the chance to try out some of the equipment and experience stuff, and then it's not like, sometimes you don't experience, you can go to the Heights and not experience anything, and then there are other nights where there's stuff going on all the time. I mean, the last group we had in there, they had to leave early. They left at like 1:00 in the morning because somebody fell very sick and was being influenced by something, which has happened before at the Heights. And they decided that it was in their best interest that they leave, and they did. You have to be very careful.
Yeah, as much as I enjoy those TV shows, at the end of the day, they do have a business. They do want to entertain people, and it's not 100% how we investigate, because you're watching the shows, and I've mentioned this countless times on the show, that when you're watching these shows, it might be an hour long, but they could be there for like a couple of weeks, and they're only showing you the evidence that they're getting.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's it's like anything, and that's why I always tell people the same thing, like I've mentioned on your interview, is that it's, you give your side of the story, and there will always be people that doubt it, and there will always be people that believe in it too, and you leave it up to them. And either way, at the end of the day, it's what you experienced, and you're not trying to, like, I'm not trying to be a superstar out of this or anything like that. I'm just doing my thing, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm sharing it with people, and that's what it's all about, as far as I go, anyway.
What piece of advice would you give someone who thinks they're going through something paranormal?
Well, first of all, just try to figure out where your life is at any given moment, and try to figure out if you're creating the problem or the issue yourself, because we found that that there's a certain demographic of people that when we investigate personal residences, a lot of the time, like, over the course of say 200 investigations, like I'm saying, like around 140 or 150 of those are single women that are in their 40s, who have had like some kind of an abusive relationship in the past or the present, and that there's been alcohol involved and some drugs. There seems to be that demographic there that seem to have a lot of issues. So you have to determine whether they're creating the issues themselves and if they need help themselves, which is a possibility. And I'm not saying all cases are like that, but there are a significant amount, to the point where it actually stands out, that these people are having, like serious issues. Like, I'm not talking about, just like seeing an apparition or something like that. I'm talking about like, entity that they feel that there are entities that are actually, disturbing their life, or they're very horrified, or, things are going on. But, I always tell people that, if, we're kind of a last resort. I always give people advice to say that, if you feel there's something in your house, be very assertive and tell it, you're not welcome here. Don't be fearful, because this stuff feeds on fear. So you try to be as forthcoming as possible, and let the spirit know that, you're scaring me, you're scaring my family. I want you out of my house, and please leave us alone, and be very strong with the way you talk to it. And if that doesn't work, well, then, yeah, maybe we can come in and, we can look at your situation. But you have to be, you have to be very careful with, we have to be very careful in our approach, and to see, obviously there's a lot of situations too that involve people that need help. So we're there as well to, offer places that they can go, or people that they can see. And sometimes they don't like to hear that, but
Yep.
at the end of the day, we have to present to them what's real. And this is after our investigation, of course. We just don't go in and say that. But but that, it's and sometimes we can be in a place and there might be no activity in a night, and then come back another night and there's activity. So you have to be very careful, and it's not something that you just kind of, do an investigation one night and then make your determination the next day. I mean, it's something that has to happen over time, and you have to get to know the place and know the surroundings and know the differences from night to night and day to day too. I mean, we do investigations during the day too, which is, one of the biggest fallacies is people think that you have to investigate at night, which is not necessarily true. You can investigate as well during the day.
I was one of those in the beginning that I used to think you have to investigate at night, but I quickly changed my mind on that, because, sometimes activity happens during the day. So logically, you're not going to go at night to investigate. You're going to go at the time that the activity is usually happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It can, it'd be kind of silly to think that only paranormal activity happens at one point in the day. It's happening all the time. And
Yep.
when I used to investigate with Richard Estep, the author, we would go into a place and we would be in lockdown for like 4 days and spend day and night there, and
Wow.
investigate constantly. And sleeping sleeping sometimes was a bit of a challenge, but especially being an empath, I find it, when you shut down or when you go to sleep, you're most vulnerable.
Yep.
And it's challenging at times, especially once you get into day 3 or day 4.
I can imagine. Well, before we sign off, Wes, would you like to tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find us on Facebook. We're very private with our information that we share on Facebook. We have some of our public investigations. Now, when I mean public, I mean when we're at penitentiary, like old penitentiaries. We're at Ohio State Reformatory down in the States. A couple of years ago, we have stuff on there with that and other different investigations. I mean, there's been not a lot lately, primarily due to COVID. But you can see us on Facebook, COPS, Correctional Officers Paranormal Society, and most of our information's on there.
Excellent. And as usual, you listeners, I'm going to be adding the links so it's easier to find. Well, thank you so much, Wes. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.
Paranormal Heart Podcast.